expectation is that the resolution calls for state action, it calls for policy. So obviously whenever a resolution comes out and it says USFG should do something, we all can assume and predict that we're going to come into a round and debate about a policy. If you take that away and you make the debate about something else, then we didn't have equal access again. So the next one is limits. They say without a planned focus, the debate can explode to a million, infinity, thousand topics, and they won't be prepared to debate all of that. Either they won't be prepared to debate all of that, that's too much to expect, or if we have to learn about a million different things, they want to do quality over quantity, which means that we don't get the in-depth of education that we need. We're just like talking about a bunch of different things, like a buffet. Like you may get a little bit of everything, but you don't experience that really good one entree dish. We're not a snack, we entrees. So we won't get that really good entree dish, which is better to them rather than just getting a little bit of everything. Am I going? So before the lecture started, I asked, I've been used to teaching middle schoolers all week, so I've been going really slow, and I just tried out a speed with y'all. Is a speed working? Do I need to go slower? Do I need to go faster? We're all good? Perfect. Okay, so here are 2 reasons why those things are bad. The most common impacts will be fairness and education. There are some different versions of those. People might say like deliberation or something, but they normally always come back to fairness and education at like the final rebuttal speeches. So fairness, I think we need to talk about procedural versus structural. Procedural fairness is a legal principle to ensure fair decision-making based on rational and scientific evidence, lack of bias, and equal time for both parties to make a case. So in debate, we treat that as, y'all heard the phrase, debate is a game? Yes? Okay, cool. So the idea is that if debate is a game, then the game has rules. Those rules were made so that everybody has an equal chance at winning the game. Things that will relate to people will give examples of procedural fairness would be like everyone has equal speech times. Everybody has a chance to speak. They can make their case to the judge. The judge is supposed to be a clean slate, supposed to be biased. There are like procedural things that have been set up, like rules that have been set up to make sure that everybody has equal access to the playing field. Everybody has an equal shot at the ballot. It has to be fair. Those procedural fairness also come with the expectation that the resolution is a point of stasis, that we all have equal access to the resolution, and that is like the main starting point, and policy is going to be the main focus. Anything absent that, like a K coming into the debate, ruins that equal access because they no longer have their equal footing in the game. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. Yes?
I'm sorry. So you're saying since they don't know, they can't debate, so therefore we're bad or something?
Yeah, so procedural fairness says there are certain rules that were set up to make sure that the game runs smoothly and make sure that everybody has an equal chance at winning the game. K debate is not one of the rules, or is assumed that it violates a lot of those rules by one, either taking away from the initial focus of the debate. And so it's like we don't get our equal access, or like for things like predictability, like I said, K debate shifts the focus from the policy center of the resolution, policy focus of the resolution, so that they have to now focus on why they thought to create that policy in their knowledge production, which isn't something they can necessarily expect or predict, which means that if they couldn't predict it, they didn't have the time to research it adequately. And that means that the negative by reading the K has an advantage to win the debate more than they do. That advantage violates the procedural fairness because we're supposed to be on an equal playing field. Does that make sense? Yeah. Cool. So the next type is structural fairness, which relates to the social injustices such as racial stereotypes that can affect students and create cognitive biases within the debate community. So the procedural fairness is the argument that policy debaters will go for in framework. A lot of K debaters will use structural fairness as an answer to it, and we'll get to that a little bit more later. But I just wanted you all to know the difference between procedural and structural fairness. So procedural is like debate is a game. We should all follow the rules that have been set forth. We all agreed upon the rules because we agreed to participate. Structural fairness considers the structures that exist. Most likely whatever K you're reading, the theory of the structure that you're talking about, use that to relate that to different types of fairness. Do we understand this difference? Cool.
So when it's targeting like debate as a whole and the other is targeting like a specific structure to debate?
Mm-hmm. Because most of the time, like whatever K read, like the Cap K will be like critiquing like how we place value, like we have a value system that affects how we interact with different people and like how we create a hierarchy. We would say that type of hierarchy that exists in the real world has also followed us into debate, which means that there are structural problems and there is structural unfairness that exists because of the capitalist system, which outweighs any of your procedural fairness. Does that make sense? Cool. And I'll explain that a little bit more later when I give you like actual answers to framework. Remember, this is just, we need to understand what framework is first. Okay, so the next one is education. One of the biggest reasons people participate in debate is for the education, because after our debate careers are over, so sad, and all the trophies have been dusted and put away, what remains that affects us is the knowledge we accumulated year after year of different resolutions. Very sentimental. It's nice. That knowledge changes the way we understand and interact the world most of the time. Either whatever career we engage in, we'll probably remember something that we learned in debate. Relationships, the way that we interact with people from different social locations can change based on the interactions that we had in debate, based on the knowledge that we gained in debate. And also political participation will significantly change after being in policy debate, because we now have new, not only knowledge of policies, but also of critiques and ways that the policy process happens and how we can not only engage on the micro level, but also get involved in the macro level. Most people will say the only thing that truly spills out of debate is the education. So policy framework would attempt to preserve policy education. So when a team gets up and they read framework, they don't go for fairness, then they'll most likely be like, no, we need to have a planned focus, because that means that we're gonna have a really good education about this topic in particular, but also policy education is key, because when we go out of debate, we can teach other people, we can have better participation in the political process, and all the problems that you are listing in your critique, you need this policy education to go and make change in the real world, is normally the argument they'll go for. Education is like the biggest thing. You understand that? Cool. So that's all great. How do I answer it? Friendly guide to the revolution. Number 1, set up your arguments and cross-ex. If you have a policy-leaning judge in the back of the room, they won't admit it. Sometimes they will. They be bold. But they do have a bias towards the other team's framework. Like I said, there is this common perception or pretty agreed upon idea that policy debate is supposed to be about policy. It's supposed to be about state action, that it's whoever gets to extinction first, is a very largely accepted opinion across the debate community. And it's what judges are used to viewing, right? So when you get up and you read a K and you have a very hard policy judge, you have to be prepared that you are already kind of at an uphill battle with them. And so one of the things I like to do is use one of the first cross-checks to get them on my side, or get them understand where I'm gonna go with it. So you have to work ASAP to establish that connection with them, to be like, I know this is what you prefer, but this is how it's about to go down, and I need you to be with me. So one of the first questions I would always ask after crossings of the 1AC was, will you defend the entire AF? Or will you defend the entire 1AC? It's important, and be prepared, because that pause people are gonna be like, what do you mean? I'll defend my plan. I'm just like, cool, I just wanna make sure, will you defend the entirety of your 1AC, of your AF? And they'll be like, yeah, I guess. And they'll probably be like, yeah, my plan is to try to restate their plan and explain it. The reason I'm asking this question is because some of your links may be based on a specific mechanism of the AF, and that's great. Some of your links, or what I used to go for sometimes, was representations matter, which means that some of the authors they might be reading in their 1AC might be bad, and might be a link in and of itself to my K for whatever I'm reading. They might have been very capitalist. It might have been anti-Black. They might have been homophobic. I don't know. But if I know something about their authors, then them reading that authors, I would go for and critique that and be like, you reading them and defending their knowledge production comes with the other things that happen to be problematic. Those problematic factors don't escape out of the knowledge that they have produced. Yes. What's your name?
Trey.
Trey? What's up?
So could that also be a link to, say, whenever you're talking about the knowledge production and methodology behind the 1AC, they explain that they defend the entirety of it,
Yeah.
so they can't.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's the connection you want to establish with the judge. Just like if they say, yeah, we defend all of it, when they get up later and they read the framework block that their coach prepared for them, then you're like, I don't know why you're like, why is plan focus key when you, in the first cross-ex binding, when you clearly established and agreed, everyone heard it, you will defend the entirety of the 1AC. So plan focus might be great now. Before I asked you, you had your chance, boo-boo, you messed up, I'm getting my links. And if you already have that moment, then the judge is more inclined to be like, yeah, you did do that. You fell for the trap. It's nice. So starting cross-ex, yes.
So what's the difference between a plan focus and like a different goal and how they're doing it?
So plan focus is just like they can spike out of like all the other links you might go for based on either the authors of the 1AC, what are the words they use in the 1AC, like their 9-minute speech. If they're just like plan focus, that lets them scapegoat from 9 minutes to like 10-word sentence.
Okay.
They're like, it doesn't matter if we use that author, like our plan is good. It's like, no, but you use that author to justify your plan, and that's my problem. So make sure like you get access to everything in that 9-minute speech. Yes.
Okay, so when you ask this question, does it relate to the entire review? They didn't read all the cards, or is it just the cards?
Nah, only the cards they read. It can also relate to the style in which they present their AF. My last year we critiqued a lot of we critiqued like spreading, just like as accessibility or like yeah, that was really it. Like spreading, reading cards instead of relying on our own experiences, our own knowledge, conversational speed. So there are different, like style is also a component that you can critique as well, but you don't have to because sometimes K debaters also spread. So yeah, step 2, identify the scope of the framework. So once they read their framework block in the 2AC, one of the first questions I would ask them, bless you, is whether their interpretation is for this round only or debate as a whole, because you can access different offense based on their response. If they're like, it's for every debate, this is our model for debate, we think every debate should happen this way, their interpretation only runs the risk of excluding certain debaters / debates from this space, which you would be able to use as a net benefit. One of the things I went for is that if plan focus is key, that means the ALF always has to read a plan. And I would use KVK debate as a net benefit for my model of debate. I would ask them things and cross-ex things like, I would give examples of very competitive and successful K debaters in the community. And I'll be like, okay, so debates that we have, me and my partner's code was Liberty HT. I was like, debates that Liberty HT has against people like Oklahoma PW, which is another very successful K debate in the circuit. I was like, are those good debates to have? Are those productive debates? And most of the time, like, no one was really ballsy enough to be like, no, those are bad debates. They're like, I mean, yeah, like, I'm sure you all have like good things to say. I'm sure those are good debates. And I'm like, okay, cool. And the thing to prove is like, if those things are good and those that have like its own form of value for production and value to add to the community, your plan focus means that those things never happen. And then I can give reasons why those things are good. So if they're like plan focus is good all the time, you can find different things or different little loopholes of why K debate is necessary and why K focus is necessary and make those your net benefits. If they say it's only for one round, you should then defend your framework as an overall model, because then all of your solvency claims on the K then become your net benefits. So if they're like, we think this is just like, this is good for this round, it's like, okay, well then I'm gonna defend mine as a model and we're gonna be Gucci and we get a lot more magnitude for our solvency. Also, you should really push them on why that round is key, because most of the time it'll be for competition and fairness purposes. And we'll get to how we turn fairness in a second. But then you can turn fairness very, very, very well and get access to all those benefits. Step 3, the interpretation debate. 2 options you can do, or you can do a combination of both. Is a type of we meet. When you're on the neg, you don't really use the words we meet. That's more for like an AF answer to framework, but it's still like a defense type of argument, which would be that most Ks includes links to specific policies and or mechanisms of the plan anyway. So if plan focus is actually good, then you still proved why their plan is bad. You just also taken another avenue. So if you're like, sure, plan focus is good, we critiqued your plan and we've proved why that's bad, the roll the negative, did it, you get your fairness, you get your education. We have also proved why your knowledge production and your education that you're producing is also bad. So we've just double whammied you. We've just beaten you very, very well. Sorry, not sorry. Give me my ballot in 30. So you can also do a more offensive argument, which would be your counter interpretation. You need to provide an alternative reason or an alternative to a plan focus, such as like representations or knowledge production. We should only look at those type of things. And then you want to provide reasons why your counter interpretation is better than theirs, which is normally the impacts of your K. You can just cross apply, which is really good because then you can already get the impact debate done at the top of the flow and then spend the rest of your time in your 2NC, 2NR going through the line by line and getting to the intricacies of the debate that happened. Cool. Step 4, prove why their interpretation is bad. You can do this in a couple of ways. Number 1, you can critique their reading of framework. You can be like, their normative understanding of framework is bad. The idea that we should only talk about policy is bad. The idea that the only way to debate is state engagement or state focus or like existential impacts. All of those normative modes of framework and normative modes of debate, you can critique that as a whole, which will normally probably just be cross-applying your links that you already kind of have on the K and applying it to their framework interpretation. You can say things like creating binaries is bad, questions of accessibility, respectability politics, which I talked about a little bit before class as well, all reasons why normative modes of framework would just exclude certain people. Yeah, what's your name?
Ryan.
What's up?
So like if, for example, you're running that, you could say like, their use of binaries is just the bourgeoisie kind of trying to almost, I don't know, divide us, be the right way of saying it, like, divide us, putting us into categories and make us think to research or think in a really closed way that allows them to control us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was similar to what I was telling Trey earlier, how they're like, with capitalism as an example, there's a hierarchy that exists that allows like the powerful and the privileged to stand on top and create the value system that inevitably creates a marginalized population who does not have access to those very said benefits. The act of reading the interpretation and them getting to set the standards of what a good debate is, what a good debater is them accessing that position of privilege that inevitably will marginalize and punish debaters as the K debaters, while they get the profit, i.e. the ballot and probably the 3029.9, and the K debaters get punished and get the L. And it's like, I don't think that's how it should work. So yeah, really good analysis. And then you can also say that role playing is fiat is bad. One of the reasons that it kills critical thinking, because the goal is name the biggest impact the fastest rather than the policy creation process itself. It also distances the debaters from real harms and the responsibility to resolve them. Like, I don't care how many times like people want to convince themselves that they're actually policymakers are actually doing things. You can have a real talk very fast through them, just like, okay, you say you want to pass this policy. When does it happen? Like, when do I actually get to see my benefits? Because we all know that the moment the judge votes for you, none of this actually happens. We are all assuming that it's just like we're engaging in your imagination. We know it's not really going to happen. So if it's not going to happen, why am I wasting my time talking about it? Because at the end of the day, you say that you stop nuclear war. Nuclear war ain't never going to happen. It hasn't happened for a hot minute. It won't. So I'd rather talk about the real things that are happening or how do we actually resolve these harms. Instead, if they always focus on what the state can do instead of what we do as individuals and how we create our knowledge production, it distances ourselves from the actual problems, which means that we never actually get to solutions to solve them. It's like, but the policy is a solution. No, the policy is a solution that the policymakers get access to. What do you as a student do? What is your solution? After you leave this tournament, you leave this debate round, what do you specifically do to solve these harms? Exactly. Your policy means that you never actually get to the solutions for yourself. Yes. Explain that to me.
So it's like the harms of the 1AC aren't true because you yourself like aren't a true policymaker, aren't the government, so you can't actually pass a plan when the judge votes out, therefore you can't get access to all of your solvency.
Yeah. Yes.
So, the other day we went over this Afrocentric futuristic fiat. Would that apply to fiat?
Explain that argument to me. Was it in your class?
We were watching this debate.
Mhm.
You want to say it again?
Giorgio's TLC finals act is Daryl Burst, like fulfilling the revolutionary fiat to imagine black people at the government, like vision of new immigration system.
Yeah. It depends on your alternative is. Like if you read that, you can also provide reasons why their type of fiat is bad, why they're like, I call it white fiat, and like normalized fiat is bad, and then you can provide reasons why your type of revolutionary black fiat is good. That makes sense. Gucci. Next reason is that you can critique their high magnitude impacts. One of the reasons I used to go for is that it just masks real violence that's happening now. People will be like, economic decline, nuclear war, extinction. It's like, okay, but what about the extinction that's happening to people right now as a result of the structural violence that's happening for whatever theory your K is behind? Always jumping for like these low probability, high magnitude impacts means we never get to the real problems, which again means that we can't hold you accountable to actually resolving these things. You just get to pat yourself on the back and absolve your guilt and then walk away with a ballot and you profit from it, which is pretty bad. We should actually engage in these. Our K conversations are important, our discussions are important to have so we can reveal the biases that are happening now, because once we reveal them, we can actually move to start creating solutions to those problems. That makes sense? Cool. Step number 5, your standards debate. You need to address the reasons they have provided and either explain why they are bad or why your framework meets them better. So I'll use one of the examples that we gave before. One of them was predictability. They'll say that being able to predict arguments is important for debaters to be prepared and have a chance at the ballot. We should be able to do research beforehand so we can come in better prepared. We need to predict. One of the offensive responses you could have is that predictability is bad. Just turn it off the front, but like, no, we should not be predictable, period. Transparency is bad, reasons that's bad. So one of the arguments I did last year was like a Black femme type of opacity. And I was like, whenever Black movements were transparent or like open and vocal about their plans and strategies in the past, that's how they got infiltrated and surveilled and targeted and killed. So when they were like, predictability, we need to be able to like know what you're doing, I was like, no, you absolutely should not. That just replicates those very harms. You're just going to target and infiltrate us and literally exterminate us. So those are ways that using the whatever K you use, you can turn whatever internal link they have or whatever standard they have and give reasons why it's bad. Defensive responses is that K framework is more predictable because it is real world, since judges are educators, not policymakers, which aligns with the whole fiat critique you would have beforehand. Also, that predictability is a practice and kind of a choice. There are infinite numbers of counterplans, disads, advantages, apps they could read, and makes their impacts inevitable because they literally have infinite prep. So it's just like, sure, even if predictability is a good thing, we still all choose what we want to read. It doesn't really, your impacts are inevitable in the sense that it's just like, there will always be a multitude of things that you may or may not be prepared for. It's kind of every debater's choice what they read or what they research at a certain point. So how do we actually know your type of policy framework doesn't get rid of this unpredictability, as you say? Does that make sense? Amazing. Step 6, your impact debate. When answering the impact portion of framework, the most common route is an impact turn. Most people just like, in debate, you always want to provide a reason in opposition to what they say. Most people just be like, if you say fairness is good, we'll say fairness is bad. If you say education is good, we'll say your education is bad. It's just impact turns. This creates an opportunity to use your K within the framing, which can provide a judge with a common story across the speech, reasons that you say fairness is bad, reasons why you say education is bad, can be pulled from your links or your impacts from your K, which again, like makes it nice and clean at the top for the judge instead of like, it's very easy to like make the debate messy and jump all over the place. So keeping it all at the top makes it very clear for the judge to be like, oh yeah, I'm jiving with you, I got you. It also means you get the opportunity to explain your solvency and make all the turns, the impact turns, your net benefit. So it's not just reasons why their fairness is bad or why their form of education is bad, but all the reasons you list as bad, you can then explain how your K or your alternative resolves those things, which means that your framework is now superior because you have X, Y, and Z net benefits. Cool. So now I told you all the arguments that the policy debaters would normally make for fairness education. Now we're going to go back through and talk about how you all should answer it. One is that structural fairness outweighs procedural fairness. They will say procedural outweighs structural. We say structural outweighs procedural because debate is not a separate space in the real world. So do not let them get away with being like, this is some isolated, separated space that like never gets affected by things that happen out there. There are still cognitive biases that affect not only the judges, but also your opponents that have significantly implicated the way we understand fairness and procedural fairness in the debate space, which happens from stasis, the resolution, policy action, which means that there are ways, one of the things I used to say was just like, I don't get to walk in a room and suddenly like my skin color does not matter. Like I am clearly still a Black woman in debate, which means that the things that the structural fairness that happens out there follows me in here. And even if debate is a game, it is one that was built off the negation of certain bodies. Like when we look back to the start of debate, the people who participated were rich, white, cis males. That is what first had access to this space. Yes, later on, and like you look at it today, it is much more diverse and that is awesome and great. But the rules and standards, like that initial perception of debate, stems from that very rich white cis male epistemic and epistemology, which means that procedural fairness, what they think procedural fairness is this, they don't understand that because of structural fairness, for the way that we enter debate space is actually like this. So when you say structural fairness outweighs procedural, what they'll try and make it seem like is that you are flipping the scale. What you need to explain is that you are actually making it equal for the first time. Your type of framework is not meant to flip the scale, make it so that you have an advantage. It's so that you take away their advantage, that you both actually have what is equal footing to the ballot. I use that skill, I use that visual a lot because judges seem to get it more. Anyway, so procedural fairness is arbitrary. There is no objective or fully universally accepted concept of what fairness is. What I think is fair can be different from what Adib thinks is fair, is different from what Trey thinks is fair, is different from what Ryan thinks is fair. There might be some similarities, but there's no objectivity, which means that when someone gets up and is like procedural fairness that way, it's just like, how do we truly measure that? If you're relying on you and the judge at the same understanding, then most of the time K-debate is going to be out of luck because why? There's already cognitive bias of what the normalized framework of what debate should be. Which means that it's not, to be like it's arbitrary, it's just like we can't really understand, like we can't make that the end all be all because we will never actually have equal footing, which literally turns the entirety of your thesis in the first place, that procedural fairness is supposed to be a lack of bias. It already exists because it's always subjective. Fairness is always subjective. Reading the K is the only way to make debates truly fair. The equal playing field is the visual that I just explained. Introducing alternative ways of knowledge production still focuses on the resolution, but allows unique interpretations that create better forms of accessibility. There's also an argument for reciprocity, in which the neg picks the framework because the AF picks the folks of the debate, speaks first and last. They have infinite prep time, which means that if you actually wanted to make it a fair debate, then it should be the decision up to the neg for what the framework and how the judge should understand the debate because the AF has access to so much more. Cool. Education. If the other team is going for education as an impact, you need to prove why their education is bad, why yours is good, or better. This is a place, once again, you can use to, you can utilize your solvency as a reason your education is good. Smart teams may concede your critique of fiat for in-round education matters. So if you already have a reason why their knowledge production is bad, then they also don't get access to that impact. Yeah, a lot of teams will just be like, you're right, our policy doesn't actually happen, but our education about this policy, that's what's gonna win us the round. But if you already have that critique set up, then, or reasons why their education is bad or why yours is better, you've already kind of closed that door for them. An example is the CAPK with the party all, not the part all, part T. You can say your education is good to be able to identify and reject capitalism in all instances. Absent that knowledge, the system is free to inflict endless violence because it'll keep changing and shifting the way it kind of manifests itself. So your knowledge production is always going to be good. One of the ways it'll shift and manifest itself can be through the knowledge production of the affirmative, and then point out specific ways in which their knowledge production through the 1AC reinstills that capitalist violence. Can I get an example though? So this is an example of when I was basic and read CAP. This was the framework frontline I read. Who wants to read it for me? Go for it.
Our interpretations that we actually have to attend the representations and knowledge production pretty much theoretically superior. So unpredictable in real world, judges are educated, it's not policymakers. You don't have the ability to physically to affect. You do have the ability to criticize their radicalized framing of the world. Playing focus is bad, it's unpredictable, and socially debating and reduces alignment and advocacy to a 4% sentence, and trains irresponsible students who don't defend their assumptions in the process by which they formulate problem solutions. Reciprocity. They get a strategic advantage from being allowed to outweigh disadvantages that should incur strategic costs that could impact her. The next should get to pick the framework for the debate, which is reciprocal and key to fairness. The aspects of focus of the debate and the personal speech and infinite prep. Predictability is a practice. They choose what to research, infinite number of CPs, VAs, ask in advance, which means their arguments are inevitable, and if they win policy making good, it's a reason why we can't endorse the Africa. The justifications for keeping it's reciprocal and fair for all reasons.
So this was a front line when most of the time teams would go for fairness as an impact. As I was putting this in last night, I realized I just think this is so defensive. I used to be a very defensive debater because it's just like, it assumes their impact is fairness, and it's just like a bunch of reasons why. Okay, even if they're right, here's why ours is still better because we explain fairness better. Not necessarily like there's no real reason why fairness is bad in this instance, or necessarily why their education is bad. So I think this is a really good start. This is very similar to the front line that was provided in your starter pack. I would say the only thing I would add is probably impact turns. So it's not just reasons why your framework is better, but why theirs is actually bad. So this was sophomore Bree. As you have more framework debates, you will create your own understanding of framework and own way that you argue it. So the next example I'm going to show you is senior Bree, which was 2 years after this, and kind of how my framework debate changed. So I told you I did a little performance debate, which means I relied heavily on like ratchet politics and cultural linguistics in debate, which is why all the highlighting is like the translations I had to use later on to translate for the judge. I'll just go ahead and read it. Defend your reps and get it poppin'. You should tell us why you brought raisin potato salad and uncooked chicken to the cookout in the first place. That's the counterinterpretation. Stop calling your aunties and uncles who ain't about it. You ain't talking that talk or walking that walk. So bye, Felicia. Ye ain't got no power. Your style keeps it soggy with some basic bit politic. Basic only want to maintain and keep up, which is our policy debates except full exclusion. So that's our critique of normalized framework. Their impacts are wide epistemic. Okay, that I'm not going to read that part. But that is the next paragraph is the impact turn to their form of knowledge production, impact turn to their understanding of education. Then we had our net benefits, reasons to prefer our framework. We had our critique of fairness, and a reason, a little fiat K was that they don't get a perfect AF. We said that if they get to sever out of the representations, that's a form of severance, which we had voters for. Then we said their idea of reform is just reactionary conservatism. Talk is cheap. They don't actualize their politics out of the space into their critique of fiat. And that the AF interpretation encourages bad debate. We talked about used embodied politics as a net benefit. But overall, this was a lot more focused on an offensive approach to framework. We were kind of done at this point of trying to even act like we remotely cared about their plan focus. We were just like, no, we're absolutely just don't care about your plan. We are totally just going for impact turn. Bless you. So that's the way we kind of see two ways we can, over the course of my years of debate, that's just like the understanding I chose to go with framework. There is no right or wrong way. It really just depends on, as you go through your framework rounds, what kind of understanding do you start to have for yourself, and how will that impact your frontline. So I think a really good one to start with is this one. I think it gets all the points across that you need. I would add the impact turns, like 1 or 2 impact turns, I think give you the offense you need overall. And literally probably after the second debate you have with framework, you'll start to change things in this based on the routes that you've had. And by the third debate, all your framework front lines will probably look a lot different, which is good, and proves that you're just learning what you need to learn on your own. But yeah, and that is how to answer framework. Yeah. Do you have any questions? Yes, Ryan.
It's gonna be hard, but
Bless you.
You know how like there was always like the traditional education and fairness, but back when my partner and I ran some policy apps, we would actually, because there is also the courtroom interpretation that's like pretty rare, and you know, so not many people use it. We kind of used it as a trump card because nobody knew how to answer it unless they were pretty good at policy. Like, how would you answer that if you're a debater and they throw a courtroom at you?
So that's another neg strat that we've ran. One of my neg strats is like we have acted like we were a courtroom. I have never interacted with an AF interpretation of the courtroom. So if you want to explain what that is to me, then I can give you an answer.
I think we only did, I think, like really we did a kind of like a counter. I think what we did was we figured out a way to combine a like court log DA with a court. We showed why the claim was unconstitutional and then used courtroom on them.
Okay.
I think what we thought of is if they ran like a CP on us, we would show why that's unconstitutional and then use a courtroom impact. That the idea was that like, we would be using. So I don't know if that would necessarily. I don't know how that would link to the case, but like.
I don't think it does. Quite honestly, I think that sounds more like just like a framework argument for policy debate.
Yeah, because once I talked about it, I realized that someone might figure out a way.
If they do, let me know what that exact interpretation is, and I will give you an answer. Yes, Trey.
What about TVAs?
TVAs are something that don't. That's if the app is a policy app and you are reading a K on the neg, they don't have TVAs because it's just it's literally their app. A TVA is a topical version of the app. I also read KAF. So if you read a KAF and they read framework, in which they will read very similar things to this, TVAs, I would always say like use your solvency as a reason. Use your app as a reason their TVA doesn't encompass the actual solvency of your app. I would also have a couple of disas to the specifics of your app. For example, I read like a Black Femme app for the healthcare topic and was like Black women should give each other healthcare. And they were like the TVA, like, no, like USFG should pass like Medicare or something like that. And I was like, no, translation disad is one of the things I use. It's like the state, I actually have the example here. We just don't have time to talk about KFs, but I will send you your, You talked about framework on KFs? Then perfect, your lab leaders are already ahead of the game. So one of the things I did for TVA, you'll see is a translation dissent. Like the TVA proves the way the state will always reinterpret Blackness in an attempt to understand it and silence it within the limits of a policy, to resolve the desire for our flesh, proves fungibility of Black women's body and labor, to read prefer breathe, it's improper implementation, improper production. So I use a specific theory of my AF of like Black women's production as a reason why their TVA only reinforces those very forced production or very constant proper production. It was an attempt to make us proper because we didn't use the exact words they wanted us to. Yeah, so use the offense from your AF as disas to their TVA. Any other questions? Great, you are a fabulous class. And you all have research next. I don't know if you all want to keep them in this room. Okay. You have your endo.
Yeah.